What's going on, everybody? Marcus here. So Daniel Espinosa just dropped a major reveal for the Morbius movie. So Daniel Espinosa is the director for Morbius, and I'm very excited to see Morbius. And considering the fact that it's going to drop on April 1st, which is on the day of April Fool's Day, hopefully it won't be a joke to where they want to push the movie back for another few months, but I don't see that happening. It's actually going to be set in stone that it's going to be on April 1st. So I don't see them at least disappointing the fans by pushing the movie a few months back. And the only reason why there were so many delays on Morbius is because of COVID-19 and the virus and so many pushback and delays. But this time it's going to be set in stone. So there's no changes. I haven't heard any changes, so I think this time it's going to be set in stone that Morbius is going to drop on April 1st. So I'm actually excited. Morbius is actually one of Spider-Man's older villains for sure. Definitely eventually become an ally eventually as well. But his first appearance in the comics was Amazing Spider-Man issue 101 in October 1971. Initially, he was Spider-Man's enemy. And then over time, as Morbius' character develops, he becomes an anti-hero. And then one of the most prominent story arcs in Marvel Comics was Maximum Carnage. And Spider-Man and Morbius actually teamed up. They become uneasy allies to defeat a common enemy, which is Cletus Cassidy Carnage, who was running amok in New York City. So they teamed up to try to stop him along with the other heroes as well, like Cloak and Dagger and Deathlock and several other heroes as well. So Morbius is actually one of the most prominent characters or anti-heroes in the Marvel Universe. Michael Morbius is a scientist, and so he develops a rare blood disorder, and he's trying to find a cure for said rare blood disorder. So he actually injected bat DNA in himself, and he's able to develop superhuman abilities. So not only did it cure his blood disorder, but not only was he able to get another chance at life, but he also developed abilities that are similar to a bat. So he's what you call a pseudo-vampire. So a pseudo-vampire is just basically a vampire that doesn't have the common abilities like you hear in other supernatural vampires in the Marvel Universe or several other universes. For example, like Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like Morbius doesn't have an abilities like Dracula. So his abilities, for example, is echolocation. So Morbius is able to hear supersonic hearing, to hear different echo sounds as well. As far as like his other abilities, he's able to have flight and being able to like be in stealth mode. And then on top of that, he also has to take people's blood in order to survive. Whether how long he has to actually have blood, it still remains to be unseen. So Marvel hasn't really gotten around to where what is the longevity for Morbius to be able to take people's blood and use it for his vitality and to survive. So, and my first exposure to Morbius wasn't actually Maximum Carnage or any of the older Spider-Man titles. It was actually Spider-Man the Animated Series. That was actually my first exposure to Morbius as a little kid watching Fox Kids at that particular time. But they've changed his abilities for Fox Kids because of the censored program at that particular time. So instead of Morbius taking people's blood for survival, he actually has these suction cup-like cups in the front of his palms, at the palm of his hands, and he's able to take people's life by sucking their plasma, and it goes straight to his cups. So I thought it was actually pretty brilliant, because I was thinking, well, hey, if they actually do something like that, maybe they'll change his abilities in the comics so he'll do something like that. So, but yeah, I thought it was actually pretty interesting though. But yeah, check out Spider-Man the Animated Series. It's on Disney Plus, so it's definitely a classic. And I know some of you guys are more than likely familiar with Spider-Man the Animated Series or have grown up on it. I know I have, because I've seen every Marvel adaptation when I was a little kid as well. So, but yeah, Morbius plays a huge part in the Genetic Nightmares story arc in Spider-Man animated series, because Peter Parker also grew out his extra arms after taking the mutation that Dr. Mariah Crawford gave him, and his arms grew out, and Morbius plays a part in that too. That's also in the comics as well, to where Peter actually grew out his extra arms, and Morbius plays a part too. So yes, that particular episode did a really great job of capturing the essence that took place in the comics as well. So yeah, so Spider-Man with the extra arms is actually pretty unique and pretty interesting, considering the fact that Peter's powers actually came from the spider itself though. So, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing Morbius and seeing the character himself. It's gonna be incredible. I'm looking forward to seeing it, and I know that actually Rob Jefferson, I'm actually going to talk about his review, and with the review he got the same thing as well. Shout out to you, Rob. You're awesome, brother. But he actually was talking about the same massive reveal as well. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and hear him out, and then we'll see if we'll actually have any clues and ideas of which Spider-Man version is going to appear. It could be, especially from the first trailer that I saw the last time, the costume looked exactly like Tobey Maguire's costume, but whether it fits Peter 2's costume, we'll find out for sure. So I know that there's definitely going to be some surprises and Easter eggs in the movie as well. So without further ado, let's get into it.
What's going on, guys? This is Robin. As a preface, this might be a spoiler. I'm not entirely sure. I have not seen Morbius yet. And in fact, we actually hired a guy on to handle half the press junkets so that I'm not just overwhelmed. And he saw Morbius. So I have no idea what's in the film. However, one of you all sent me an email where you were basically talking about an interview that was done with the director of Morbius, with Espinosa, kind of talking about the grand scheme of things, right? So this is where it might be a little bit spoilery, but we did a video previously where we talked about Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield, that this was basically a thing where I kind of argued that they were essentially spider totems, or at least some variation of the spider totems that exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Now, I was thinking about spider totems as first, because there's difference in connectivity between animals and heroes as well. So spider totems is pretty much connected to for example, like people who are connected with spider powers. For example, you have Peter Parker, Jessica Drew, you also have Miles Morales, Gwen Stacy in the alternate universe. Like people who are connected with spider powers basically have the exact same ability as spiders as well. So yeah, that's pretty interesting.
The Marvel Cinematic Multiverse now, and the director had come out and seemingly confirmed that. So here's what he had to say. In talking about the multiverse, he said, you have a world where you have the same characters, and it's all of the characters, but they are slightly different. So in almost all universes, you have Spider-Man, or Fantastic Four team, or Tony Stark, or Morbius, but they will be different in tone. That's not quite the way the Marvel Cinematic Universe approaches the idea, but they're remaining to the same core truth. Then you have the second kind of legend, that which is about the totem, which is that in all universes, there is a spider totem, which means that in all universes,
there has to be a Spider-Man or a Spider-Woman.
Now, I don't know exactly what this means outside of the totems. The ongoing theory based on that interview that's circulating around out there is that the Spider-Man that we see in the Morbius film is not a Spider-Man we've seen before. It's not Tom Holland, it's not Andrew Garfield, and it's not Tobey Maguire. That it's a fourth live-action Spider-Man, and things are just kind of unfolding there, right? That, in effect, Morbius is a movie that's part of the multiverse. It has all the characters that we know, but it's a different universe version of those characters. So it's kind of interesting, right? And it kind of makes sense to a degree. That when you look at Michael Keaton as the Vulture, as Adrian Toomes, if it really is just an alternate reality version of these characters, then that really explains how it is that you could have Michael Keaton playing Adrian Toomes in a Morbius universe that's not in the same universe as the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Now, having said that, the totems is really the more interesting thing, because as we said in that previous video, and as we're going to say here, the totems would really build up to something bigger, especially the idea of Null. More so than that, if they wanted to do the Inheritors, if they wanted to bring in those different iterations of the villains that basically travel around and consume anybody related to the totemic aspect of superpowers. More so than that, because of the fact that the totems are basically based on animals, now you also get to invoke Black Panther. So for those of you guys who never saw that previous video, what it means when we talk about totems is we're essentially saying superheroes whose powers are based off animals. So like Black Panther, right? He inherited the powers of the Panther God or Panther Goddess Bast, and then in turn operates as the Panther God's avatar on Earth. But he's modeled after the Black Panther. Black Panther's an animal, therefore he is the earthly avatar of the Black Panther totem. With Spider-Man, which is really where a bulk of the totemic discussion comes from, that Peter got his powers from a radioactive spider. And as a result of that, he represents the spider on the animal kingdom totem of different animals, right? That kind of a thing. The reason why Spider-Man is really the bulk of the discussion when it comes to totems is because that's where it originated from. And that based on that, that's where the inheritors were always tracking down spiders. There was a point where Merlin, who is one of the inheritors, had actually tracked down Black Panther and tried to kill him. Didn't work, and that ultimately he was defeated. But the important thing here is that it brings in a much bigger picture. More so than that, it really unites everything in a very elegant and a very simple way. One of the big questions that's really been asked here recently is that if we're talking about like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and we're talking about Spider-Man Beyond Spider-Verse, then you look at Spider-Man No Way Home, and you've got Tom, Tobey, and Andrew, who are all teaming up. Like, this can't just be a coincidence. It can't just be a thing where like Sony and Marvel sat down and said, you know what would be cool? Having a whole bunch of different movies where different versions of Spider-Man team up that leads to nothing, right? Like nobody would be a fan of that, right? It would make sense they're building up to something bigger. Yeah. This is kind of the Spider-Man equivalent of like an Infinity Stone appearing in this movie, then like an Infinity Stone appearing in that movie. Captain America's shield having a kind of cameo in an Iron Man movie, right? Just small little tidbits here and there that are all going to combine into a greater whole. We already know, based off Spider-Man Beyond Spider-Verse, we're going to get Miguel O'Hara and presumably Spider-Punk and maybe a couple other versions of Spider-Man. By the way, there's some amazing versions of Spider-Man in Marvel Comics.
Lots
but
of
then when you combine in like Tom, Tobey, and Andrew teaming up,
yeah, totally. Like Miguel O'Hara is definitely one of my favorite Spider-Man too, especially from Spider-Man 2099. Definitely one of the top favorite Spider-Man. What I would love to see is definitely a team up between Spider-Man 2099 and Morbius. So that would actually be really cool to see something like that though. So, but considering the fact that Miguel O'Hara is going to show up in Beyond the Spider-Verse, it's going to be pretty interesting too, but I still like to see Morbius team up with Spider-Man 2099 as well, so that'd be something to look forward to in the future, pun intended.
Look at the events of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, it makes perfect sense that what they're building is a spider multiverse, that there is a big event that is somehow going to unfold in some form or another, and it's going to lead to all these different iterations of Spider-Man teaming up. The big question you have to ask here is, who's going to be the guy? When it comes to like the different Spider-Men, who's going to be the guy? Because the one thing I would say is whether or not you're a fan of Tobey or Tom or Andrew really depends on what era of
see, I like all three of them though, that's the thing.
To the Spider-Man movies with like nostalgia, so you grew up with the Raimi films, Tobey Maguire is your guy, right? If you are a guy who recently joined the MCU with like Iron Man, you never really watched any comic book movies before that, then Tom Holland is probably your guy. And no one was a fan of Andrew Garfield until we got to his appearance in this movie, and then suddenly everybody who hated his movies loves him now. Search me for one.
I love Andrew Garfield though, man. I thought Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2 were awesome though, so.
So it's not one of those things where like on the surface it's obvious Tobey Maguire is like the Spider-Man guy. He's like the head honcho. There's no guarantee it would work out that way. The bigger thing, though, is that with the director coming out and saying in every single one of these universes that exists in the Marvel Cinematic Universe multiverse, there has to be a version of Spider-Man, now we come across a virtually endless type of Spider-Man that can exist. A really good example of this is Spider's Man. Literally, a man made of spiders. It's weird. It's kind of creepy.
Yeah, it is kind of creepy, though.
Over at Comics Explained. But it's just one of those different iterations that exist out there.
So weird.
There is also my personal favorite, who is Superior Spider-Man.
My favorite, yes. Doc Ock in Spider-Man's mind, yes.
The Marvel Cinematic Universe. The beauty of this is that if the Morbius film really does include a version of Spider-Man who's just there, and it's his own version of Spider-Man that is not tied to any of the other projects and movies that we've seen before, then this would largely confirm what we already know, which is, at this point, we don't need the origin of a Spider-Man in an alternate reality. That if he is in that film, and if somewhere along the line, Jared Leto's Michael Morbius faces off against that version of Spider-Man, we don't really need to know the specifics, right? We don't need to know how that Spider-Man became Spider-Man. It could just kind of be left to us. Okay, so either Uncle Ben died or Aunt May died. Whatever it was, he was probably bitten by a radioactive spider and that was it. I mean, they would probably give us how he got his powers if for no other reason than basic curiosity, but like, we don't necessarily need a great big huge hour-long segment to explain that. Spider-Man is Spider-Man. You have to leave planet Earth to find someone who doesn't know who he is. So it's pretty straightforward. But this also gives us a litany of possibilities, right? A really good example of this is Enigma Force Spider-Man. That's a guy that we could get now, right? For those of you guys who don't know what who
Enigma Force Spider-Man
is, this is basically a version of Spider-Man who got what was basically the Enigma Force.
Yep.
And they call it that because nobody knows what the hell it is. It's just a really powerful source of energy that bonds itself to a person. And when Spider-Man got that, it was actually during the Loki storyline. God, what was the name of that story?
Acts of Vengeance.
Oh my God! It's the one where Loki brought all the villains together.
Acts of Vengeance. That's what it's called, man.
Acts of Vengeance, right? It's from the Acts of Vengeance storyline. Right,
my favorite storyline. Yo.
Like, that was it, right? It didn't last too long, and the Enigma Force left him. But there was an alternate reality version of Peter where he never lost the Enigma Force, and he was ridiculously OP until he was killed by the Inheritors, right? By like Solace of the Inheritors.
Right.
Dude absorbed the entirety of his life energy and then killed him. It was crazy. It was just really, really ridiculous. But it means you can see all kinds of different things. Now, the Enigma Force, as we're aware, does not exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the traditional sense, but it actually does. The Enigma Force is what I would say Janet Van Dyne had in Ant-Man, right? The Enigma Force is a
it kind of makes sense.
The microverse. The microverse is the quantum realm in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's literally what it is, just a microscopic universe.
Yeah.
That's it, right? The Enigma Force permeates all of that, and it can bond itself to a person, and they can just go forward from there. So, again, you can see all different kinds of possibilities with these versions of Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I love that this is basically confirmed, right? That, like, in every single one of these universes out there in the multiverse, there is a version of Spider-Man or Spider-Woman, right? They are totems. It's inarguable. Now, what role they play as totems, that's where things will start to get interesting.
Right.
Because it's one thing to be a spider totem, it's another to be the scion or the other, right, or something along those lines, right? The bride in the case of some version of Spider-Woman out there, maybe Cindy Moon, maybe Spider-Gwen, maybe somebody else, who knows? But we won't really know until the whole thing drops, until they reveal that to us. But I'm just saying, there's great possibilities here, and there's a lot that can come out of this. Now, again, I haven't seen Morbius, so I don't really know exactly what it is he's referencing, if there's anything on the nose, right? If there's a point where, like, there's a post-credit scene with Null or the Inheritors or anything along those lines, I have no clue, right? I'm going to go see the movie in theaters just like everybody else, and I'm excited to see the review when the film, or to do the review when the film comes out. But regardless, these are the kind of things that we're dealing with here, right? So it's effectively confirmed by the director, and so at this point, your imagination is really the limit in terms of what kind of Spider-Man and Spider-Woman you can see. So, for those of you guys who are familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and all of you guys are, right? If you could pick, or you could have one variation of Spider-Man, right? One variant of Spider-Man, what would it be? And this, it's your imagination, right? So, like, Spider-Man who became Captain America, right? So, who basically received the super soldier serum and then was bitten by a radioactive spider.
Yeah, that was a funny issue.
Spider-Man who replaced Iron Man. So, instead of Tony Stark bringing on James Rhodes as War Machine, it was Peter Parker, right? Like, what kind of version would you want to see, right? Let your imagination run wild in the comments, because I would absolutely love to see what you all come up with.
Yeah, same, man. Because the thing about that is like there's so many imaginations to see where Spider-Man's going to appear in Morbius. So, I mean, I think more than anything, pretty much at this point, let your imagination just pretty much run wild until April 1st. Because, like I said, we have like at least a lot of movies to come out before now and then, because we got Morbius and then we have Multiverse of Madness. So imagine Morbius tying into Multiverse of Madness, because we actually had the exact same thing with Venom and Spider-Man at the same time, between Spider-Man No Way Home and Venom 2 as well. So there's going to be some connectivity between those two, I believe. So, but yeah, I'm very excited to see Morbius. It's definitely going to be great. It's definitely going to be one of the best films for sure. And I know, despite it being an hour long, it's going to be pretty interesting. And I want to add one more thing too, considering that he was talking about the quantum realm. Considering the fact that Ant-Man in this third movie, Ant-Man and the Quantumverse, it's definitely going to be dealing with the Enigma Force even more as well. And considering the fact that Spider-Man was actually had the Enigma Force during the Acts of Vengeance storyline, it's definitely going to be pretty interesting as well. So I think we'll definitely see more of the Enigma Force and Ant-Man the Quantumverse. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see what they're going to continue to do with that. So, and then considering the fact that Janet Van Dyne's mom, who was played by Michelle Pfeiffer, was able to use it against the Ghost, who was interesting enough as it is though. So, but yeah, there's so many to Untied. I'm looking forward to seeing Morbius, so it's gonna be awesome. You guys comment below, which Spider-Man do you guys want to see? Looking forward to seeing Morbius as well. You guys looking forward to seeing that? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Like this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel. Keep doing you guys' part. Share the message, share this video. Don't mind it, helps everything out. So you guys continue to be good, spread love, and on top of that, I'm just gonna end it for right now. So you guys keep doing your part, be good, spread love, and I'll see y'all in the next one.